Bethesda's latest IP was doomed from the very start, and it all started with the egregious ripoff of a few already established games. You'll hear frequently from other critics about how it's just going to be a ripoff of No Man's Sky, but honestly it steals from an entire library of games. Bethesda has managed to make the video game equivalent of Frankenstein's monster to try and trick people into thinking it's going to be a well thought out and improved version of these games I'll mention in a second. In reality, it's just going to be another full-price AAA game that will certainly die a month after its release. Okay, firstly, I'd like to set a few things straight. This is obviously just my opinion and also my initial impressions of Starfield, based solely on the content currently out. And secondly, I'd like to emphasize that I'm a huge Bethesda fan. I've been consuming their content as far back as 2002 with the incredible release of Morrowind. Morrowind was my first introduction to their games, and from then on, I was insanely hooked. Over the years, I've been enthralled with the charm and uniqueness of every large release since. From Morrowind to Fallout 4, we can all admit there's an exceptional magnetism to each new game Bethesda puts out, whether that be from the goofy glitches of their very own creation engine or the whimsical nature of the worlds they formulaically manifest. At their peak, they seemed untouchable, especially since the release of their ferociously popular game, Skyrim. I know most of you my age still think back to the time Skyrim dropped and we all stayed up late to attend the midnight release and witness one of the greatest journeys we'd ever been on. Dragons, dwarves, dwemmers, and you, the Dragonborn. A story so captivating they've managed to release it a total of 9 times over the last 12 years. This is an amazing accomplishment for just one single game, and it left everyone on the edge of their seat waiting, salivating over the next release from their favorite developers, that being Fallout 4. Yet another banger from Bethesda Softworks, Fallout 4 brought forth a new era for the franchise, much like Skyrim, taking elements from its predecessor and amplifying it with additional features and a distinct polish. This felt like a turning point for Bethesda, a company that had it all and was destined to continue to rise up and keep their fan base satiated. Then, tragedy struck. They attempted to try something completely out of their wheelhouse: MMORPGs. While it may be a familiar cousin of the genre they've already dominated, they appeared to not have an easy transition in. Elder Scrolls Online and Fallout 76 paled in comparison to the namesake they were modeled after. This felt like the beginning of the end for Bethesda, and to this day they continue to update it in an attempt to make each game an enjoyable experience. Unfortunately for them, it was already too late, and they entered a market they weren't fully prepared for. And that's not to say that fans of these franchises weren't chomping at the bit for a multiplayer Skyrim or Fallout experience, but the execution was just downright pitiful. ESO has had some minor successes in longevity, but I imagine Fallout 76 is just better off being forgotten. I'm assuming they very well recognize this too, particularly since during the Starfield Direct, they seemingly intentionally cut it off as they panned through their catalog. I think I personally only have about 7 hours into Fallout 76, and most of that time was spent questioning why I bought it in the first place. This is not what fans were wanting. Now, why in the hell am I even bringing these games up? What does this have to do with Starfield? Well, I just wanted to set up my point that the last time Bethesda decided to be adventurous and breach into uncharted territory, they were massively burned and left a bitter taste in their fans' mouths. This brings me to Starfield. After years and years of a community literally begging for Elder Scrolls 6, old Toddy Boy announces their next big game, and it's not ES6. It's an entirely new IP they called Starfield. While many were excited for this brand new adventure, me included, it was a curious move to steer clear of a surefire win and go after a brand new endeavor, especially when it's nothing novel to the industry. As most of you know now, and as I mentioned earlier, Starfield borrows nearly all of its concepts from already existing games, namely No Man's Sky. Crafting, base building, scanning, unique planets, combat trading, all fall under the umbrella that is No Man's Sky. Now, I know many of you will be quick to point out that Starfield is obviously more realistic looking, and while it does share many aspects with No Man's Sky, it's going to be a totally different experience. And I can adamantly say, I don't fully agree. Let me introduce you to the next victim, Elite Dangerous. Elite Dangerous is a space simulator / RPG that came out back in 2014 and really brought realism to the genre with incredible ambient sounds and a user interface that made you feel like a real starship captain. In my opinion, it encompasses everything you'd want from a spaceflight simulator, with elements of battles, to missions, to factions, and customization. If this is what you're most excited for with Starfield, I recommend trying it instead. It's had plenty of time to work out most of its kinks, and even has a DLC that introduces some first-person combat, albeit it doesn't have the best reviews. Accompanying the slew of rehashed content Starfield is attempting to profit off of, we also have a lack of a graphical upgrade. That's right, Bethesda is making the executive decision to remain loyal to their very own creation engine to build the massive universe that Starfield has taken place in. Although there has been updates to their engine via some shaders and additional motion capture, the overall look of the game doesn't feel any more refined when comparing it to like Fallout 4. The biggest difference I'm really able to spot and give credit towards are the variety of colors used and the huge makeover of the buildings within the cities. There's also an obvious improvement to the reflections as well as apparent tweaks to the shadows and god rays. Where the problem lies with me is in the character model textures featured in the Direct, which I'm assuming will represent the final product. Since NPCs are the direct link to the player and how Bethesda is going to tell the story, it would be rather nice to see a larger upgrade with their textures and models, making it feel more real and personal. And while we're on the topic of cities, our friends over at Bethesda attempt to emphasize how lively each of the pre-built cities are all throughout the universe. Wonder where we've heard that before. In the 45-minute long Direct, the team mentions how there will be plenty to do and see just by wandering around the cities and listening in on the various NPCs. I'm extremely skeptical when it comes to this topic for several reasons. For one, Bethesda has never implemented anything of this scale in any of its previous titles. And for two, I feel like the majority of this game is going to be centered around these pre-existing cities, with a bunch of empty planets whose only real purpose is resource gathering or base building. It's simply crazy to me how this team managed to grab an overflowing handful of previously controversial games and smash them into one, hoping for the best in the meantime. No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, and even Elite Dangerous's Odyssey. I hate to continue to bring up these games over and over again, so if you're tired of hearing it, I'd really leave now. I'm about to rapid fire off everything I perceive to be inspired by another original creation. Spaceflight, combat, sound design, docking, warping, missions, base communication / cargo scanning, factions, and even the damn HUD are straight up a copy of Elite Dangerous. The look and feel of everything I've seen so far go to extreme lengths to copy everything down to the fucking sound design. This drives me crazy. Mining, scanning, travel, galaxy maps, planetary maps, weapon customization, perks, and ship trading are clearly inspired from No Man's Sky. The only thing changed here is the addition of completely desolate planets and a less cartoony look. And even the idea of desolate planets to me feels more like an excuse to cut corners and less like an additional feature. The layout of the ship customization is a pretty clear nod to KSP. The entire setup with the 360 camera control and piecing together a ship like a Lego set is damn near identical, with a little Bethesda flair. And don't even get me started on the combat. It reminds me of so many games that I'm definitely not going to list, but the look and movement remind me of things like an older Call of Duty game or The Division, with inspiration from various other games in the genre. Moving on, the promise of an incredibly lived-in cities and endless interactions is super reminiscent of the pre-release claims of Cyberpunk 2077. Where were you on the 10th of December in 2020? I was planted on my couch, constantly having my hopes and dreams shattered by the one and only Cyberpunk. It overpromised on many things, but one of the huge red flags was how dysfunctional the NPCs acted when they talked to you. This is being pitched nearly identical with Starfield, and I have no faith that they will actually execute this correctly on launch. This will likely be fixed in a later patch. And lastly, when you get to the point to where you get to build your own outposts, Bethesda boasts of their new, top-down build map like it's something new or revolutionary. I'm sorry, but look at any city building simulator. City Skyline, Surviving Mars, RimWorld, Stranded Alien Dawn, they all use this exact setup, with the only difference in Starfield being the ability to decorate the inside of your base in the first-person perspective. Wowee, what a novel idea. Okay, now this is getting a little ridiculous. What is there left to do? There's gotta be something that's original here, right? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the only thing I was able to disseminate as original is unfortunately the outdated engine used to conceive this universe. Okay. In the end, I'm still going to play through this game with the intention of forgetting these preconceived notions to the best of my ability, even though they're a pretty huge hump to get over. I've played each of the previously mentioned games fairly extensively and cherish them all for what they are individually. I just think Bethesda is making a huge mistake by entering this market with a heavily inspired and clearly unoriginal idea, instead of putting more effort and focus into Elder Scrolls 6. They're acting as if they didn't announce it 5 fucking years ago, which really is plenty of time to finish it given the size of their team. I'm hoping for a decent product for Starfield, but at this point in time, I just don't see it happening, and I predict I'll be back to Baldur's Gate fairly quickly after it comes out. Again, this is all just my opinion, and I imagine you have yours too, so feel free to leave it in the comments, and I'll see y'all next time.